Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the Southeast Climate Monthly webinar, where we talk about the climate and special topics pertaining to the Southeast region. I am Sandra Rain, the regional climatologist from the Southeast Regional Climate Center, and I will be giving a climate overview and a tropical update. Our speakers today are Jeff Dober from the Southeast River Forecast Center, who will provide a water resources overview, Pam Knox from the University of Georgia, who will give an agricultural impact update, and our special topics speaker, Chip Conrad from the Southeast Regional Climate Center, who will talk about heat risk tools for the Southeast. As always, we thank everyone for joining us. And just a reminder to type your questions and comments in the question box at any time, and they will be answered at the end. Also, a recap email of this webinar will be sent out with a YouTube link to this recording. Okay, let's talk about the climate. Temperatures were near average across much of the Southeast region for the past 30 days, with very few extremes reported. However, Tampa, Florida did observe its second warmest July on record. Precipitation varied across the region for the past 30 days, which is common during the summertime. The areas that had above average precipitation were the areas that saw the greatest impacts from tropical systems and thunderstorms. And even though we haven't seen a tropical system since Hurricane Elsa. Hurricane Elsa made landfall in Taylor County, Florida on July 7th. Elsa brought heavy rains, gusty winds, storm surge, and tornadoes to the Southeast region from July 7th through 9th. Unfortunately, a 26-year-old man was killed in Jacksonville, Florida, when a tree fell on his vehicle. The Northport, Florida area saw over 10 inches of rain from Elsa and numerous reports of flooding. Elsa also produced 15 tornadoes for the Southeast region. The strongest of these tornadoes was rated EF2, with winds of 130 miles per hour in Camden County, Georgia. This tornado produced significant damage to an RV park near Kings Bay Base. There were multiple RVs flipped over, and one even was blown about 200 feet into the lake just north of the RV park. Fortunately, there were no injuries or fatalities reported with this tornado. Hurricane Elsa might have been the last named storm in the Atlantic has seen for a little while, but that doesn't mean the season is over. The National Hurricane Center has put out its Hurricane Season Outlook update on August 4th, with 15 to 21 named storms, and we've had 5 so far, 7 to 10 hurricanes, and we've only seen 1 so far, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes, meaning Category 3 strength or higher. Overall, this is a slight increase from their May outlook. They still continue to forecast an above active season. And this is important because we are now coming to the most active time of the year for the Atlantic hurricanes. According to the National Hurricane Center, the season peaks on September 10th. Now, I've included a map of the points of origin for the tropical storms for the last 2 weeks of August. And you'll notice that areas off Africa and in the southern Atlantic are now areas where we'll start to see more storms originate from. So what does that mean for the near future? Well, the National Hurricane Center is watching an area of concern, the area in red on this map. Now this map is from yesterday, so as of today, they have since removed the area in yellow. But the red area is potential tropical cyclone 6, and it is forecast to become Tropical Storm Fred later today. They expect tropical storm conditions in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico by this afternoon. The biggest concern is heavy rainfall and flooding, especially across the eastern and southeastern portions of Puerto Rico. So now is the time to prepare. This is a reminder from Flagler County, Florida, to make sure your preparedness kit is ready to go, including enough water and food, flashlights and batteries, and generally an overall plan of what to do in the event of a tropical storm or hurricane. One of the many reasons the National Hurricane Center is still predicting an above average season is due to the probability of another La Niña. We are under a La Niña watch with a 51% probability of La Niña developing between August to October, However, this is still the last month's discussion, and the new update will be released this Thursday, August 12th. So it will be interesting to see if there are any changes. As far as the current drought monitor, you still notice that there's severe drought in the western portions of the United States. They are battling with several large wildfires out there, which can impact the southeastern region with poorer air quality. In our region, what we noticed over the past month is an area of abnormally dry conditions in North Carolina and Virginia, with a small area of moderate drought in northern Virginia, and an area of abnormally dry conditions in southern Puerto Rico, with a small area of moderate drought there as well, and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. However, the drought outlook does see drought removal should be likely in these areas. Over the next 3 months, the Climate Prediction Center is anticipating a probability of warmer than normal temperatures and the probability of above average precipitation as well across the southeast. For the next 6 to 10 days, however, that's August 14th through 18th, there's a slight probability of above average temperatures for most of the region, and precipitation varying, with a small probability of above average precipitation in eastern North Carolina and a small probability of below average precipitation in western Alabama, with equal chances everywhere else. This, of course, is dependent upon thunderstorm activity and the potential tropical system. The Weather Prediction Center shows that the potential tropical system 6, or we'll see tropical storm Fred later today, is likely to impact southern Florida by this weekend. And even though these maps are from yesterday, the current maps from this morning continue to show that by this weekend, southern Florida will start seeing some impacts, and it will move northward through our region, through North Carolina, by Monday or Tuesday. However, these can change at any point in time, so it'll be worth keeping an eye on for the next few days. And just to sum up, temperatures have been near average. Precipitation has been variable. We did have Hurricane Elsa. We're looking at potential tropical storm Fred. The Hurricane Center has updated its outlook, and it continues to be an active season. We are still under a La Niña watch, but the next update will be this Thursday, August 12th. And as far as the continuing week, we should see impacts probably from the potential tropical system by this weekend. All right, I'll turn it over to Jeff Dober with the River Forecast Center.
All righty, thank you, Sandra. And so as Sandra pointed out, potential tropical cyclone number 6 is expected to move near Puerto Rico actually today and tonight. With we're looking at 1 to 3 inches with higher amounts, and this could pose some risk for scattered minor flooding across the island. I didn't have a slide for that, but I wanted to bring that up. And as Sandra pointed out, this system is expected to approach the Florida Peninsula by the weekend, and even though it may not be a strong system, it's going to bring some widespread deeper moisture to the region and to the peninsula, and this will pose a heavy rain and flood risk by the late weekend into early next week. So we'll be watching that closely. And so as you can see right now, the stream flows across most of the southeast are running above normal, well above normal, especially across parts of the Florida Peninsula and parts of Alabama and the Gulf Coast, and really the coastal regions of South Carolina and North Carolina as well. So we were drying out there. It seemed like for a while there in May and June was dry. You can see in the hydrograph here, after a dry June, we had a very wet July. And on average, across the southeast region, we're running well above average as far as stream flows. And so when we look in more detail at the different regions, we'll go to the next slide. And we can see this has mostly been true for Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. that have had some of the tropical impacts and just have really had a truly wet July. The stream flows in these areas are really, the stream flows are running more like you would see in January rather than July, as you can see in the graphs there. And that is going to pose an inherent flood risk as we go into this the heart of the tropical season. So again, we were drying out there in July. You see the dip there in Georgia. We were almost into the below normal range, and then the wet July. Now we're in the above normal range for Georgia. And Florida is even more significant. Once the convective season really started, it really started getting going in July. And you can see that significant jump there from almost the well below normal conditions. That's that darker brown, to now we're in well above normal stream flow conditions since the month of July. And so again, it does not bode well for flooding and flood threat going into the tropical season. If we go to the next slide, the good thing is across the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, we're still running relatively near normal. They have not seen as significant of a wet July as some of our areas in the west and south have in the region. So that is good. Good thing there. And we go to the next slide. And we'll show you the latest. Here's the latest flood conditions we have ongoing. Again, we've got some high water in the coastal regions in North Carolina, but most of our activity as far as flooding has been in the Suwannee River Basin in North Florida, where we're in the Santa Fe River group, and some of the basins near Jacksonville, where we're seeing minor to actually several of these rivers are still rising, and expecting significant flooding in the middle Suwannee out on the 13th and 14th. So approaching the weekend. So it'll be interesting as we get that deeper moisture into the area during the weekend and early next week, with some of these rivers still rising and near their crests, what kind of impacts that will have. And we're watching that very closely. Central Florida as well, some of the air basins around the Tampa area, all running very high right now. And we've had off and on flooding down in that area as well. So they're posed for additional flooding as well. Going to the next slide, and we can show you what's typical this time of year. We're in week 32, and typically, as Sandra pointed out, we're still quiet as far as the tropics. July is generally a quieter time for the Southeast as far as flooding, but really has not been this year. And so you can see, we really do typically, climatologically wise, we ramp up some of our flooding going into the next 4 or 5 weeks as the tropical system starts to peak typically. Next slide. So overall, what we're looking at for the late summer autumn flood outlook, that's August through October, is based on the inherent conditions. We're looking at an above normal risk of flooding across Alabama, Georgia, the coastal regions of the Gulf Coast, as well as the Florida Peninsula right now, especially the areas around Central Florida, the Suwannee, and some of the coastal rivers in the Panhandle. For the South Carolina, North Carolina, right now, the inherent risk is pretty normal, and we're just expecting typical flooding. But as usual, or as often we say, things can change drastically with one large tropical system during the tropical season. So again, we're at a heightened watch here going in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, this thing will not be a substantial flood maker, but we'll be watching it, like I said, over the next couple of weeks. So in summary, as far as water resources, stream flows are again above normal, especially across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama after a very wet July. All our reservoirs across the Southeast are near their target pools, and we'll see some of these are going to be heading into their winter pools by early autumn. So with stream flows running more like January, and them trying to get down to starting to go into their winter pools as we go into October and November, there'll be a lot of water being sent down some of these rivers. So we'll have to watch that as well. Then overall, given a very wet July and current high stream flow, there's going to be an elevated risk overall over the next 3 months for river flooding across the Southeast, especially Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And that's all I'll have. That's all I had. And I will pass it on to Pam.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jeff. We've got just a few agricultural impacts, and Sandra has shown some of these figures already, but I just wanted to repeat that in the last month or so, it's been cooler than normal for most of the region and also wetter than normal for a lot of it, except that western half of North Carolina and into Virginia where there is some drought. The results of that, the soil moisture map on the right shows how dry it is up there where they haven't had rain and how wet it is along the east coast of Virginia and North Carolina, and then down in the southeast corner of Georgia and into northern Florida, where it's been tremendously wet. I mean, the soils are pretty sandy along the coastal plain there, but the farmers can't get into their fields, and so they're way behind on putting out fertilizers and fungicides and other agricultural chemicals like that. And the result of that is that they start to lose their good quality of leaves, and so the yield goes down on a lot of those crops. And unfortunately, that's not very good, because likely when Fred happens, which is likely to be later today, that's going to be in the prime area where they're going to see more rain. And so that'll be an issue for them. That just continuing the story of this year, it's been very green, but it's certainly been causing a lot of problems for farmers. So let's go on. And some of the recent impacts that we've seen, the rainfall has been good for dryland farmers. If you don't have irrigation, you haven't really needed to use that much this year. Forage has caught up quite a bit. The damp conditions have reduced the impacts of insect pests, but definitely have increased the amount of fungal diseases. You can see some of the fungus on the plant picture there on the right-hand side. And there still are armyworms in pastures. They're kind of something that happens every year, so they're definitely eating away at the pastures. Corn at this point is mostly past the growth period where they would really have to worry about the effects of rain so much. It's drying down now. Of course, that can cause issues for harvest later. And we've noticed that a lot of fields are so wet that farmers are having to have people come in and fly in their pesticides and herbicides and so on, because they can't get in on the ground without causing really big ruts in the ground, especially in the areas where they have more heavy clay soil. So if we go on, the rainfall across the region in the next week, this is just the 1 week showing that a lot of the coastal plain is likely to have a relatively dry week. Probably temperatures will be a little bit above normal too, as we wait for the next storm to happen, and that'll give the farmers a chance to try to catch up on some of that. Should work okay for the sandier soils. For areas with the heavy soils, they still may not really dry out enough. And then, of course, the big question mark, which I have down there over Florida, is where is Fred going to go? If Fred goes up where they're most likely, the west side of Florida, and then crossing into the Florida Panhandle, and then maybe on up to the northeast, most of the rain usually tends to be to the right and along the path. So that means that Florida is likely to be wet again, especially the peninsula of Florida, and then the southeastern part of Georgia, which is already wet. And so that is going to be a continuing problem for them. Other areas could be relatively dry. So the warmer temperatures will help get the crops a little bit more back up on their development curve, but it's also going to help diseases develop, especially fungal diseases. And then, after Fred, there's another wave that just came off of Africa. We don't really know what's going to happen with that one yet, but it's that time of year. And as Sandra pointed out, we're just really approaching the peak, and we can expect to see a lot more activity. We don't know where those storms are going to go, but somebody's going to get wet. If we go on. Some of the threats to agriculture in the coming weeks, as I mentioned, the peak of the tropical activity. Don't know where they're going to happen, but we're certainly going to see some of those likely. Wet conditions, as Sandra mentioned, will continue to occur. It's not going to be every day, but if we're in this warm flow off the Gulf of Mexico, we're going to have humidity enough there to really pop up some daily thunderstorms. So we kind of will expect to see that. That tends to distribute the rainfall around, but it does mean you don't really get any long dry spells to get in and dry up the ground. And then the La Nina climate conditions will start to really become more of a player once we get into late fall. And you might remember that typically La Nina winters are warmer and drier than usual, especially in the southern part of our region. And so by the end of the growing season and into harvest, that might become more of an issue. Also something to consider for next year, because often in the southeast, when we have a La Nina over the winter, we have drought. It doesn't happen every year. It certainly didn't happen this year, but something to keep in mind. We go on. Just wanted to remind you that you do have a shot at still doing some preparation for hurricane season. And there's a couple of guides I just want to point here. Sandra pointed to another one. The USDA has a whole series of hurricane preparation recovery guides for different commodities. You can pick your favorite commodity and look at that. It talks about how to prepare ahead of time and then also how to recover afterwards. So those are really good to look at, and I'm sure that they'll put this in the recap email so that you can go back and look at these. And the Georgia Residents Handbook to Prepare for Natural Hazards. It's written for Georgia, but we're really not that much different than the rest of the Southeast, and so that might be something useful. That's more for homeowners and others that are trying to really storm-proof their own properties. We go on to the next. Here's my summary. So far, at least in the last month, we haven't had that much impact from the tropics, but I expect that's going to change soon. The dry areas in western and central North Carolina and Virginia are still there, but there's not a lot of drought. And, depending on where the tropical storms go over the next month or so, they may get more rain, and so those may disappear. The cooler conditions that we have had have slowed the development of crops a little bit. It's also reduced evapotranspiration. And so that's helped to keep those soils wet and increase the flooding risk, as Jeff mentioned. A lot of disease pressure from fungal diseases, not quite as much from insect pests, although they're always there this time of year. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the next week or so should be warmer and drier. That will help the farmers to catch up on some field work, but it's probably not going to last. And so with that, I will end my presentation and pass it off to Chip Conrad, our special guest speaker this week.
Okay, thank you very much, Pam. So I'm going to talk about a heat risk tool that we've developed here at the NOAA Southeast Regional Climate Center. I'm going to give you, first off, kind of a real quick primer background on wet bulb globe temperature, which provides really one of the best measures of heat stress. I'm going to then just look very quickly at the climatology of wet bulb globe temperature, how it varies in space and time across the Southeast. And I'm going to show you how to use our WBGT predictor tool, and you see the link there. Next, please. So just real quickly, a little bit about our program. So our tool predicts wet bulb globe temperature over the next 5 days. This is the first year that our tool's been expanded out to the entire Southeast, and we've made a number of refinements in the tool, and a lot of this has to do with field work we've been conducting. And you can see there the picture in the bottom left there, comparing weather observations at an actual weather station. You see there the tower in the background, and we have a Kestrel instrument that a lot of the high schools use to measure wet bulb globe temperature, and we have an actual wet bulb globe thermometer. You see the sort of the black bulb there situated, and we have been working over the last couple of years. Most of this, of course, was before COVID, with high schools across North Carolina to engage them in learning more about the challenges they have with measuring it. And we've been to high schools across the state too, and literally measuring some of the values and learning a lot about how wet bulb globe temperature varies locally. Next. And so wet bulb globe temperature, unlike the heat index, accounts not only for air temperature and humidity, but also, very importantly, wind speed and solar radiation. So it takes all of those into account. Next. And so this is a map here that shows how wet bulb globe temperature typically varies across the southeast US. This particular image here shows the average number of days in which there's at least 1 hour of black flag conditions. And one thing that's very important to point out with wet bulb globe temperature, it has its own scale. And when wet bulb globe temperature gets to 90 or 92 degrees, for athletes, this is the threshold for black flag, which means you're not allowed to practice at all. And so we look at the geographic pattern here, and you can see generally farther to the south, the values are greater, but it's very interesting to look at the details of the pattern. You see that you tend to have the most days of black flag sort of in a crescent that moves basically from southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and then basically the western part of Florida and northern Florida, and then another area there in South Florida. And you see very close to the coast, wet bulb globe temperature is not quite as high on many days, and that has to do with the fact that it's breezier there. And so wind really plays a big influence. I'll say more about that here in a second. In contrast, you look up into the Appalachian Mountains, you can very clearly see the imprint of them. So higher elevations, we know temperatures are cooler, there's less water vapor in the atmosphere. And as you get up to somewhat of the higher elevations too, it'll be a bit breezier. So all those mean that you're going to see less dangerous wet bulb globe temperature conditions. And that's not to suggest that heat's not a danger, because people in these areas, of course, are not as acclimatized to heat. So it will get hot there, and it can be dangerous. Next slide. And so this just shows the timing of the maximum in wet bulb globe temperature. And you can see the light colors there indicate an earlier time, as early as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And you see that generally along the east, especially the east coast. The sea breeze kicks in early. So you've got more wind that's generated there, and then you've got cooler air that moves off the ocean. It has a lot of humidity with it, but it is slightly cooler. And very importantly, in terms of heat stress, because there's a breeze, that does take some edge there off the heat. And then the very latest timing of the peak in wet bulb globe temperature you see up there on the northwest part of the map. Interestingly, you see areas there in the Appalachian Mountains around, say, Asheville, where the peak is just maybe slightly earlier than it is in the Piedmont and the Tennessee River Valley to the west. And that is just simply due to the fact that you tend to have more clouds there that develop, convective clouds that develop over the higher terrain on a typical summer day. Next. And so we've learned through our research that wet bulb globe temperature is incredibly sensitive to wind speed. And this plot just basically shows a generic situation. This could be anywhere in the south, say in August. It's not unusually hot or anything. Just take a temperature of 86 and a dew point of 70. And if you look at the red line there, what this shows is as the wind speeds go down, the wet bulb globe temperatures really go up. So we're holding temperature and humidity constant, and we're just decreasing the winds. And so going from a wind speed of 3 miles an hour just to a wind speed of 1 mile an hour raises the wet bulb globe temperature from 88 all the way up to 94 degrees. And so this is very much a 2 flag increase. And so a lot of sensitivity with wind speed, and wind speed relates very much to land cover. Next slide. And so this is a satellite image showing Ashley High School in Carolina Beach, North Carolina. So this is a place that you would imagine it has higher wet bulb globe temperatures in a lot of areas, but as I was mentioning, being close to the coast, it's not quite as great. In this particular area, we're down there, and you know, we learned that wet bulb globe temperature rarely gets that high because of the wind. And so you can see from the Google map there's a lot of open space. The sea breeze kicks in typically in the early afternoon. And while it can still be dangerous, and while you can still get black flag conditions occasionally, it's not quite as bad there as it is if you go a little ways inland away from the sea breeze and you go into areas that are much more sheltered. Next slide. And so contrast that with Cedar Ridge High School in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Hillsborough is located just about 8 miles north of Chapel Hill, so it's in the Piedmont of North Carolina. This is typical Piedmont sort of geomorphology, so it's hilly. You can't appreciate it from the map, but I put there in the white box the practice field. It is down in a pit, so it's a low-lying area. And on wet summers, such as the summer of 2018, wetlands are present on both sides of it. Trees cover 3 sides of it, as you can see from the Google map. They don't get hardly any wind there. And consequently, wet bulb globe temperatures on many days get well into the black flag range. And so in spite of it being farther north compared to other locations in the southeast, this sort of microclimate, if you will, can be especially dangerous. So local land cover really plays a huge role in this. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to segue now into a brief description of our tool. So this tool basically takes gridded forecasts from the National Weather Service. So these are hourly forecasts, and they're a gridded product on a pretty high resolution. And we have those forecasts, I think, going to 36 or 48 hours, and then it's 3 hourly after that. But we basically, our routine inputs air temperature, humidity, pressure, wind speed, the predicted degree of cloud cover, and then we have a calculator that calculates the solar azimuth angle. So all this is basically inputted into the model, and then we have a real sophisticated routine then that predicts wet bulb globe temperature from that. Next slide. And so this is what it looks like here. So this is just a screenshot that I took of the model. It's operative now for the entire Southeast, and the Southeast also includes Kentucky, Tennessee, and we put Mississippi in there as well. Our plans are to upgrade the model further and extend the geographic domain to the entire eastern US in May of 2022. So the tool is very simple. So all the user needs to do is input a location there in that white box. You can see a very, very detailed lat long location there. That's roughly the location of my house. But you can just put anything in there. It's a Google map, and then you just simply hit the submit button that you see down there. And then when you hit the submit button, you end up with a plot that shows the predictions of wet bulb globe temperature for the next 5 days. So we'll expand that out. If we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is expanded out. So this is a forecast I pulled yesterday for Raleigh, North Carolina. And so, so this is a forecast for the day Monday, okay? And so this forecast goes all the way up through Friday and the early parts of Saturday. And the solid black line there, that is the prediction for wet bulb globe temperature. And what we have there, the coloration, the coloration in the background, those are the flag levels, and these flag levels vary depending upon the application. For high school athletics in North Carolina, 90 degrees and higher is black flag. In South Carolina and Georgia, black flag is 92 degrees. And so this is very helpful then for people in athletics to sort of get a sense of how dangerous it's going to be over the next 5 days. And also on any given day, they can look and see in terms of prediction, if we were to delay practice an hour or two, you know, how much will the wet bulb globe temperature probably go down? The other thing I'm going to say here is you see those light gray areas here, that shows the range within which wet bulb globe temperature can vary depending on how much shade there is. And so you see here over the next 5 days, WBGT values are going to be high, and this is going to be a mostly sunny day. And so you see that the black line is almost at the very top of the gray shaded areas. So, but on the other hand, let's say if you're in athletics, you say, well, we can find a shady spot to practice, then you can project that the wet bulb globe temperature will be down towards the bottom part of that gray area. And so you can see there for several days, like take Tuesday, for example, in Raleigh, the projected peak is about 92 degrees. You see it there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you go straight down to the bottom of the gray area, you see about 85 degrees. So that's between the green flag and then the yellow caution flag. So that there makes a 3 flag difference there. And so through our engagements with folks here in North Carolina, they find that very, very helpful. And so this, and just kind of looking at this, so, you know, for the next 5 days, it's going to be dangerous in the afternoons. And it's not like there's a peak where it's dangerous at one time, but generally going from late morning hours on some of these days to late afternoon, black flag conditions are expected across Raleigh. Now I pulled up also Macon, Georgia. If you go to the next slide. Okay, and if you will, Meredith, maybe if you toggle back and forth so you can just kind of see the difference between Macon and Raleigh. And you can see it's very similar, but you can see then for Macon, the values really go up. And so they go up and they approach 95 degrees. But what's really significant on this plot is the period of the most dangerous conditions really extends from late morning, almost to at least to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so that's the thing. When you go farther south, you're going to get slightly higher wet bulb globe temperatures, but very significantly, the period of dangerous conditions is somewhat longer. Next slide. And so we've taken a look at the accuracy of our tool. This plot here just shows for the first, I believe it goes to about 65 hours. Our tool is quite accurate. And so we define accuracy as what percent of the time does it predict within a particular flag level. And so we get values a bit above 80%, basically going out to 2.5 to 3 days. And then after that, the skill of the tool goes down. And I think this very much mirrors National Weather Service forecasts. They give generally excellent forecasts for the next couple of days, but then that skill starts to go down as there's more uncertainty as we go into the future. Next slide. So some caveats and just some particular things about using this tool. You want to absolutely tune it to the current weather. Wet bulb globe temperature forecasts are strongly affected by changing sky conditions. And as you all probably know, in the Southeast, we have pop-up showers and thunder showers quite frequently. And while the National Weather Service does a great job of forecasting the probability that they may occur, you don't know when and you don't know exactly where these things are going to pop up. And so when you're looking at a forecast, you need to be mindful of that. And so of course, when you get clouds, then you can get some cooling just because obviously you're in the shade. But another thing that happens, and people don't realize it, even pretty far away from storms, you can get cooling outflow conditions. And these outflow boundaries can go sometimes tens of miles beyond the area where there's rain and dangerous lightning. So anyway, so the bottom line here is it's always important to be mindful of the changing sky conditions and have contingencies there if you've got some outdoor event, and thinking about it in terms of heat, because sometimes the tool might forecast black flag conditions, but you get a pop-up storm a ways, let's say to the north or east, and you get that cooling effect. Another thing we've noticed also, and there's forecast errors in the late morning, and that relates to what we call debris clouds from thunderstorms, particularly thunderstorm complexes in the Midwest that maybe develop the night before, and they're dissipating or they're completely dissipated, but there's just a lot of clouds around in the morning, oftentimes mid-level clouds. And so that can depress the temperature by a couple of degrees. And so anyway, those are things that are just difficult to forecast. Next slide. Okay, so just a quick summary. So wet bulb globe temperature is a heat stress measure. So it accounts not only for temperature and humidity, but also wind speed and radiation. It's typically greatest in the interior coastal plain, especially northern Florida, southern Georgia, and Alabama. It's typically highest in the early afternoon, and it shows significant variations at a local scale that relate to wind speed. And so I went through the tool there, and you can see there the address for the tool. I'll just also say, as we're thinking about the forecast, wet bulb globe temperature is going to be at dangerous levels over the next 5 days over much of the Southeast. And one thing I will say here too, we know that temperatures have not been as hot in the Southeast as prior years. We've had more clouds and so forth. But even with temperatures over the next 5 days, they're maybe normal or just a few degrees above normal. And with that, you still have really dangerous heat. And so that's just climatology in the Southeast, right? And a lot of people get heat illness just on typical days across the region. So obviously you want to be very mindful of that. Quick acknowledgements. Jordan Clark's done a lot of the field work. He's one of my PhD students. Jordan McLeod produced these beautiful maps. Sandra Rain and William Schmitz have also helped out. And I want to thank the North Carolina High School Athletic Association that's facilitated engagements with high schools across the region. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Chip Conrad, and thank you to all of our presenters today. My name is Meredith Muth. I work at the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and I co-host this webinar series with the National Weather Service and with the Southeast Regional Climate Center. If you have any questions about what you heard today or anything related to climate in the Southeast, please go ahead and enter that into your question box. A recap email will be sent out later today with the webinar recording and key takeaways. Our next webinar is September 14th. We'll keep you in suspense right now in terms of what topic that will be. And then in October, we'll hear a little bit about how precipitation trends, hourly trends, have changed over time in the Southeast. When you close out, if you haven't taken our post-webinar survey, please do, just to help us improve, and let us know if there's certain topics that you would like to hear about related to climate in the Southeast. Okay, and now what I'll do is invite all of our panelists to start answering questions. Our first question is for Chip. Are there plans to expand the wet bulb globe temperature prediction tool for other activities, such as working outside in agricultural fields?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's something that I neglected to bring up. But yes, absolutely, we want to tailor the tool to different groups, and and so we need to figure out what the appropriate scales there are for the different flag levels. I'll just mention that OSHA's requirements, they're similar to what I was showing you here, but anyway, they're a little bit cooler. So yes, so absolutely, we want to tailor this to different groups across the region.
Great, thank you, Chip. We currently do not have any other questions or comments. I'll let it stay open for another minute. In the meantime, do any of our panelists or our guest experts who are on the call right now, do you have anything else that you would like to say about recent or upcoming climate conditions in the region? You're welcome to chip in. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come on right now. I'd like to wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. As usual, we hope to see you next month. Stay safe and keep your eye out for a potential upcoming storm, Fred. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.